Good afternoon. I'm Jared DeWese, Senior Communications Advisor for Third Way's Climate and Energy Program. I'm pleased to introduce Congresswoman Nikema Williams of Georgia's 5th District. Georgia's 5th includes metropolitan Atlanta and suburban East Point, Druid Hills, and Forest Park. Representative Williams is a freshman member of Congress and holds the seat once held by a giant of the House of Representatives and her mentor, Congressman John Lewis. As a member of the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, she will play a pivotal role in the shaping of policies that will have an impact on the future of urban highways and urban renewal projects. Thank you for joining us, Congresswoman Williams.
Thank you so much, Jared, and good afternoon, everyone. I am Nikema Williams, and I am honored to be with you today and honored to serve on the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee and my voice to providing solutions on how we can create policies that actually help people and fix many of the issues in our communities caused by policies that were previously seen as transformative. We all know that the Federal Aid Highway Act led to the segregation and displacement of people of color when highways were built right through the middle of our communities. We saw this in cities like Chicago, New Orleans, and of course, the city that I represent and call home, Atlanta. It's the home to the busiest airport in the world and also some of the most major highways in this country. The building of these highways and freeways came at a price for the people living in the neighborhoods nearby. I've been working on a bill with Transportation for America and Third Way that would right this wrong, and it will create new competitive grant programs at the Department of Transportation that would invest in the redesign and deconstruction of highway and freeways infrastructure in these neighborhoods. This is an equity and environmental justice issue, and I'm committed to finding solutions that work for those that have been most impacted. So I'm happy to have this conversation today.
Thank you again, Congresswoman Williams. We've heard from Secretary Fox about why the issue of urban freeways disrupting communities of colors is a national concern. Can you tell us a little bit more about why it's important to the people of Atlanta and the 5th District, how it's impacted communities there, and why you've chosen to make this issue one of your priorities on the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee?
Jared, Atlanta is a prime example of the displacement with the building of Interstate 75, 85, and I-20 straight through the middle of Atlanta, which was a predominantly Black neighborhood and communities in the 1950s. Once those highways were built in Atlanta, homes, schools, churches, community spaces, they were all demolished. And in exchange, these communities received congestion, pollution, and low air quality. And I'm in Congress. I came here to make sure that I always center those most marginalized. And that is exactly what I intend to do by reversing the damage of these highways that severely impacted our communities.
Wow, I'm from nearby South Carolina, so I know the area quite well. When you talk to your constituents about the infrastructure barriers in their communities, what do they say they need in terms of federal support to help them address these barriers? Is it funding, technical assistance, more cooperation from the Department of Transportation?
So there are so many needs in our communities right now. And while there are many needs, including streets, sidewalks, bridges that are in need of serious repair, the things that you typically think of, those projects may not seem that big to other people, but the communities that need these infrastructure repairs, these are critical for people getting around, getting to work, getting home every day. And of course, funding is one of the biggest barriers. But what we've recently heard from many communities, specific needs, is the need for the technical assistance to figure out how to even get their projects on the STIP or the tip, for instance. Like, I've been going through this as a member of Congress. Like, how do we navigate this to get people the resources that are available?
Wow. You raised this issue with Secretary Buttigieg at last month's Transportation and Infrastructure Committee hearing. And the secretary said we need to make equity a direct consideration in all of our funding decisions around transportation and infrastructure in the future. How can Congress do a better job going forward of making sure we invest in our infrastructure in a way that addresses equity and makes our transportation system work better for everyone?
So, Jared, I was pleased to hear Secretary Buttigieg acknowledge the issue, and I was very pleased to see President Biden included this in his infrastructure plan and a call to restore and reconnect neighborhoods with a $15 billion, billion with the B, $15 billion investment. Moving forward, Congress as a legislative branch will need to ensure that any infrastructure package, it takes into account consideration of the unique needs of the communities where these highways are located. Oftentimes, we don't have all of the answers, which is why it is so important that we meet with organizations that are working on these issues and the people in the communities themselves, just to figure out what infrastructure actually means to them and how can we make sure that we're not displacing them as we incorporate new ideas. We don't want to rehash problems of the past. We also need to make sure that we're putting forth real money. And I believe that the $15 billion in President Biden's budget will be a great start. And I hope that we can see similar amounts in an infrastructure package. We should always look at things from an equity lens.
I'm so glad you brought up the American Jobs Plan. There's that what President Biden has put forth, but Senate Democrats also included a grant program to help communities address infrastructure barriers as a part of the Economic Justice Act. Do you feel encouraged that this could be the year the federal government finally takes action? And what else could be in place for that to happen?
So I'm very encouraged. I mean, we're looking at so many things that have come up in this Congress. And what we know is that we have to have programs that will address inequities. I think that a program should focus on the redesign of the highways while looking at ways to make areas more environmentally friendly. This can be done by the Department of Transportation working with state DOTs to identify communities with highways that need to either be removed or repurposed to benefit the surrounding communities and neighborhoods. This is our opportunity to be bold and visionary, and this would open up communities and allow people to benefit from now new green and open space.
Right. And removing or otherwise addressing urban freeways and other infrastructure barriers is a critical part of making our transportation system more equitable. But it's not the only thing we have to do. What are the things in addition to urban freeway removal that we need to make sure get included in the upcoming infrastructure package to ensure that a more just transportation system and economy?
So the area around the highways are prime locations for any repurposing or removal of the highways that will need to be done in a way that benefits all of the communities that don't further displace residents. This can be done through the creation of land trusts that would allow people living in the neighborhoods to retain their wealth, because we all know that wealth inequality is a huge issue in Atlanta. And it can also include affordable housing preservation and development, home ownership programs, as well as revitalization and economic development projects for communities. We have to make sure that we're centering those that are most impacted by this.
Right. My colleague Ryan Fitzpatrick at the top of this webinar mentioned the Derek Chauvin trial. The entire country is watching Minneapolis right now and awaiting the verdict in this trial. We are at an inflection point in this country around systemic racism. What do you say to your constituents and to the country as we await this verdict and are processing on how to move forward, whatever that verdict turns out to be?
Jared, I wish that the entire country could feel what Black mamas felt all across this globe. When the nation heard George Floyd cry out for his mama, I held my little son a little closer, like so many moms did across the country, who pray every day that our children are able to come home safe. But it shouldn't be this way. It doesn't have to be this way. And while we can't legislate racism and white supremacy out of existence, and no good news or bad news can replace the loss of a loved one that's taken at the hands of law enforcement, we've been able to do some things here in Congress. The George Floyd Justice and Policing Act honors George Floyd's life by enacting transformational systemic change, by banning deadly chokeholds, ending qualified immunity, eliminating racial bias in policing. George Floyd, Dante Wright, and hundreds of Black men and women should be alive today. And we need the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act to protect our communities across the nation, because no mom should have to have the conversation that I'm dreading having with my 5-year-old. He's only 5, and one day he's not going to be seen as my cute little Carter cakes with dimples by society, and someone's going to see him as a threat. So we have to do this for every generation of children that are counting on us so that they not only have the ability to survive, but to thrive in this country.
Thank you for that, Congresswoman Williams. I can't think of a better way to end this segment. I'm going to go ahead and pass it on over to my third-way colleague, Alex Laska. Thank you again.
Thank you, Jared.